We have some breaking news now from the Bill Cosby trial. The jury apparently came out after 4 days, 30 hours of deliberations, and told the judge that they cannot reach a consensus on any of the counts. Now, this does not mean that this is a mistrial by any means. They told the judge that they cannot reach a consensus, and the judge further instructed them to return to deliberations, gave them some clarification as to what their instructions are, what is the expectation, and warned them that this could mean a mistrial if they can't figure out a way to come to some sort of conclusion.
Exactly. And so, you know, one of the things that the judge said was, do not feel compelled to surrender your honest belief solely because of opinion of fellow jurors. Really had to just let people truly understand what it means to not come to a consensus and the true ramifications of that. The jury walked back out at 11:31 to keep deliberating. And
now we know that they had asked to hear some of the testimony from Andrea Constand. There's 300 pages of testimony. She spent a lot of time on the stand. They asked to hear certain segments of her testimony and also hear certain segments of Bill Cosby's interrogation, for lack of a better word, when this case occurred. Now, Bill Cosby did not take the stand, so they were looking to find out what he said to police at the time of the incident. They wanted to rehear both of those things, which took a lot of time. We have the court stenographer reading word for word in sort of a very bland delivery exactly what Andrea Constand had said in a very emotional manner on the stand.
And just to remind people, this trial's been going on for 9 days. Again, 4 days with the jury deliberating. And it's important to note that the jury had asked 7 questions. And something that we had been talking with our own CBS legal analyst, Rikki Klieman, about was that is a lot of questions for a jury to keep coming back and say, hey, we need this, or we want clarification on this. So I guess that this might not be surprising to legal experts that they might not, be coming to a consensus at this point. But what is it? Is there just one person, or is it, is it split? I mean, we just really don't know at this point. But what we do know is that the judge is saying, you go back in and you keep deliberating.
So we know Jericka Duncan is standing by outside of the courthouse in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Jericka, you've been there for the duration of the coverage here. What's the latest?
Well, we've been standing by because we know that any decision could be made at any hour. And I just want to read you the notes that we just got from our producer, Vidya Singh, who's in there. She said that the jurors seem very tired, that the foreman said that they cannot come to a unanimous consensus on any of the counts. That's important because there's always a chance that maybe they all agree on one of the counts. And each count, if convicted, Bill Cosby would face up to 10 years in prison. And there's 3 counts, 2 of them really dealing with the consent issue, and the 3rd one dealing with whether or not an intoxicant was administered. Now, if you recall, I believe it was the 2nd day that jurors had a question about what it meant without her knowledge as it pertained to that 3rd count. Again, that has to do with administering the intoxicant possibly being the pills that Andrea Constand said Bill Cosby gave her. Remember, she said he gave her 3 blue pills. She told him, or told the jurors, that Bill Cosby told her they were herbal pills. And then later we heard from a deposition from Bill Cosby's own mouth, this is what he told officials, that it was actually Benadryl. They've brought in a toxicology expert to say that how if possibly there were 3 Benadryl, they could have the same effects as maybe Quaaludes. Quaaludes is an interesting topic because we know that in a deposition given in 2005, Bill Cosby mentioned having Quaaludes with the idea of giving them to women that he wanted to have sex with. So, excuse me, this all comes down to that aggravated indecent assault, 3 counts, but the defense also made a point to note that this is also about reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt, and the burden of proof is really on the prosecution. The defense noted in their closing arguments that if this jury had any hesitation, that they would have to acquit Cosby. And there have been many questions posed in this case as to, for example, why Andrea Constand reported that the initial alleged assault was on March 16th and later changed her story about maybe it was sometime between mid-January and mid-February of 2004. She also initially told authorities that that was the first time that she had been at Bill Cosby's home. She later recanted and said, well, wait a minute, I was at his home before a couple of times, and oh, by the way, I met him at Foxwood Casino, and I did go to his hotel room one evening. So there are some questions that the defense has clearly laid out, and we don't know right now if that is a point of contention, if it's the questioning of what really happened. Or if it is, very specific based on these counts. But we know that all of these counts, there is no unanimous consensus. So the judge has charged them to go back and deliberate, talk about this longer, and find out if maybe they can reach a verdict. The defense, though, was quick in the courtroom to ask, oh, is this a mistrial? And the judge quickly told them, the defense, no, they're going to go back, they're going to look at the facts, and they're going to try and reach a verdict. But right now we are deadlocked. We're not sure which way this is going, but we know that the jurors are deadlocked on all 3 counts of that aggravated indecent assault. Each count, Bill Cosby faces up to 10 years if convicted.
So, Jericka, we had heard that the jury asked to hear back some portions of Andrea Constand's testimony. She was on the stand for a very long time. As I understand it, there are 300 pages of her testimony. Do you know what portions they were most interested in?
They were interested in the portions where she describes what happened the night she says she was allegedly, the night she says she was sexually assaulted at Bill Cosby's home. I can go down some of the questions that they have had from the very beginning. The first one had to do with 3 little friends. This was a reference that Bill Cosby made when he gave these pills to Andrea Constand. They wanted more context, and that was a point in time where they asked for more evidence. So they reviewed Cosby's civil deposition testimony. They reviewed what Andrea Constand said. Again, the question of defining without her knowledge, the judge at that time saying that he couldn't define it anymore. Andrea Constand's testimony that she gave at the trial has been reread. Comments that Bill Cosby made about the alleged assault has been reread back to the jurors. So there's no question that this jury has been very deliberate in the questions that they're asking and making sure that they get clarification on things that maybe they're unsure of. And I think that was the first sign early on that they were having, some issues with all coming in agreement on these charges, or this charge and those 3 counts. So it's not surprising, I think, for all of us who've been out here that this is the end result, at least right now, that this jury is deadlocked. But again, the judge ordering them back to deliberate to try and see if maybe they can figure something out.
All right, Jericka Duncan, stay with us here for a little bit. And if you're just joining us, we just want to recap what's going on here. We have breaking news out of the Cosby trial. Trial's been going on 9 days. Jury's been deliberating for 4 days, and they just came back in the past half an hour or so telling the judge that they cannot come to a unanimous consensus on any of the counts. The judge then rereading instructions to them and said, you know what, keep deliberating and then come back to me and tell me what your true decision is here.
We're also learning that the defense really tried to jump on that notion as soon as they could, and they tried to declare this a mistrial, tried to ask for it to be a mistrial, and the judge would not allow that, sending the jury back inside to deliberate again. And now we have CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman joining us. Now, Rikki, I have read, at least when people have been speculating about this case, that the feeling was the longer the jury stayed out, the greater the likelihood that the conclusion would be not guilty.
Well, the longer the jury stayed out, the greater conclusion would be the jury would be hung. There was no question that if the jury could believe Andrea Constand beyond a reasonable doubt, which means they would look at her story and then look at the corroboration of her story, which included, by the way, another accuser and that corroboration, as well as what the police officer said, as well as the toxicologist, as well as the rape trauma syndrome expert, that they would have come back Monday night or certainly no later than Tuesday night, because you either believed her story beyond a reasonable doubt with the corroboration or you had a doubt. So when you get to 3 days at the end of yesterday, at the amount of hours at that point, and now you're into today where they've had a night to sleep on it, this is a hard-working jury. This jury has asked for readbacks, extraordinary readbacks, in terms of length and in terms of depth. And each readback, if you look at it, with the exception of one, had to do with, let's look at her story and let's look at what he said. They really looked at his deposition, in essence, as his testimony. And he is, in an odd way, candid to a fault. He's very open in that 2005 deposition about what happened, including the fact of she didn't affirmatively agree, but she didn't say no. It was somewhere in the middle. These are my words, not his. That he did give her 3 little pills, which were her friends, that it was Benadryl. So he's open to a fault. So if you have a jury that's looking for doubt, because we're talking about beyond a reasonable doubt, that's a huge burden. That's up at the top of the scale. It's not a preponderance of the evidence like a civil case, which is like a feather on the scale. Well, if you're looking for doubt, you know, they always tell a jury, do not search for doubt. They say that. Search for the truth. Because to have a verdict is to speak the truth. But juries may search for doubt.
Is that just innately like a human thing to search for that because they know that that's what will bring them to a quicker conclusion?
Well, I don't know that it's that they think it'll bring them to a quicker conclusion. When you have to assess someone's credibility in life, do you simply take them at face value, or do they give you body language or certain words that give you clues that you may say, well, I'm not so sure if I believe this person? And you had a closing argument from Mike McMonigle, who did doubt after doubt after doubt of her story. He didn't attack her character beyond saying that she lied. We understand he's going to say that she lied. But even in the trial, in the aggressive cross-examination by his colleague, they didn't attack her as a human being. They attacked her story as not being the truth. They're very different. They're very different. So you could have a jury, we don't know, we may never know, or we may. Could be 6-6. Could be 9-3, could be 11-1. But if you have people camped in a camp, it's hard to make them change their minds. You know, there's a thought process that we've always said as lawyers, that if you get wedded to something in the opening statement, if you get wedded to a side, it's hard to dissuade you. And if you have a closing argument as powerful as Mike McMonigle's, you really could say, you know, I believe her.
Right.
I think she's telling the truth.
I remember,
but I don't believe her beyond a reasonable doubt.
I remember, Rikki, you saying that his wife was there for the closing arguments and she had not been there before. You thought that was an interesting tactical move on behalf of his attorney. I was going to ask Jericka Duncan who is there now, but I want to ask you about the significance of his wife not being there for most of the trial, but being there for those closing arguments.
Well, Mike McMonigle made a very calculated decision, which I actually had condemned initially. I thought Bill Cosby should have been there from the beginning. But then when I read the closing argument, I only envy Jericka Duncan and our other colleagues who were there that they got to hear both closings, because when you read both closings, they're both really very solid. What McMonigle did was this. He acted as if he brought her, in essence, that she came for the closing, and McMonigle could do the public shaming of Bill Cosby, so the jury could get it that McMonagle thought he was a bad man, he was an unfaithful husband, he was a philanderer, and that wonderful language, if you dance, you must pay the man, and he danced, and she, Camille Cosby, deserved better. I get the chills just saying it. And I do that as a lawyer because it was a stroke of genius. He used Camille Cosby as a prop for his closing in a way that elevated the wife, elevated her, and shamed the defendant. So he gave the defendant enough shame that he's saying to the jury, he's been punished. You don't have to punish him.
Right.
As a lawyer, you can only appreciate the process.
Let's bring back our correspondent on the ground here at the Cosby trial, Jericka Duncan. Jericka, we understand you have a little more information.
Well, it appears that Andrew Wyatt, the spokesperson for Bill Cosby, just took the podium. The last time we really heard from him, he was talking about how he didn't feel Bill Cosby got a fair trial because of a witness they wanted to call, but the judge denied it because he felt it was hearsay evidence. Essentially, they wanted to call a witness who they say knew Andrea Constand, actually roomed with her when she was a director of operations of basketball at Temple University, and tells the story of a night they were watching television and a story about a woman who said a man sexually assaulted her and was able to get money from him or something to that effect, that Andrea Constand watched that and made a comment that she could do the same thing. So that was the witness that the defense wanted to bring to the stand but was never able to. I believe you guys are able to listen in, possibly. I'm not sure if we can listen into what Andrew Wyatt is saying at this point. But I imagine he's saying, you know, they're waiting to see what happens. Again, the defense was very quick to jump on the judge and say, hey, so are you saying this is a mistrial? And the judge again said, no, we're not saying that. We're going to give the jurors an opportunity to go back and deliberate and figure out if maybe they can reach a verdict. But just to piggyback off of some of what Rikki Klieman said is, you know, the defense definitely laid out many times where there were some inconsistencies, but from the prosecution side, and even from one of the accusers of Bill Cosby, again, not a criminal case, but somebody that said he sexually assaulted me years ago, said this is a slap in the face for them. I imagine the prosecution feels they laid out a good argument. They brought in Kelly Johnson, again, to show previous behavior or similar behavior. They brought in the mother who recorded some of her conversation that she had with Bill Cosby, and we heard some of that, in which he does say that he's going to write something down and send it to her, referencing the pills that he gave to her daughter. I hear a lot of reporters shouting out questions to Andrew Wyatt. We're going to try and get you that interview here in a second.
Jericka,
but again,
we know that you got to head back over there and get some reporting done, so we don't want to hold you up any longer.
Okay.
Thank you so much for giving us the update.
Absolutely.
And Rikki, also you, thank you for the analysis as well. We have a lot more news to cover here. You're watching CBSN. We are always on.